Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you are here to learn about studying in the land down under, Australia. Unfortunately, we did have our cousins in New Zealand joining us, but they had to pull out for today, so it's just Australia. But if anyone does have any questions about New Zealand, we would be happy to answer those for you. My name's Lea-Anne and I represent Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. I have been with the university for about 7 years now, and I'm based in Los Angeles, and I've been out here for about 5 years for the university. Todd?
Good day, everyone. I'm Todd St. Vrain, the North American manager for the University of Melbourne. I'm based in San Francisco. I grew up in St. Louis and then went to grad school in Australia and wound up living there for 10 years. So I've worked at high schools and universities on both sides of the Pacific, and happy to share that perspective today. On to Tori.
Hey everyone, my name is Tori Ellenberger and I work for Deakin University. It's based in Melbourne as well. So I grew up in Pennsylvania and studied in Ohio, and as part of my undergraduate degree decided I wanted to head down under. And so that sort of began my journey with living and working in Australia. So I ended up moving back there, starting a family there, and working for 2 universities in Australia, and have recently moved back to the US here. I'm based in North Carolina, and so happy to help with anyone's questions on a more reasonable time zone, as are my colleagues.
Thank you. So today we're just going to give you a bit of information on why you should consider Australia as a destination for your studies, what the academic life is like, the application processes, because it is a little different to the US system, as well as how do you afford a degree in Australia. And then we'll just go quickly into each of our individual universities so you can get a better understanding of the different campus life. And then certainly time for Q&A so you can ask us all your questions. Firstly, it is 2020, so we have to talk about COVID-19. Australia's done a pretty phenomenal job of sort of suppressing the virus, generally speaking, in the country. Currently, the Australian borders are closed to non-Australian citizens, so those who were commencing this semester were asked to start online until it's safe to transition to Australia, which we're hoping we're going to get more clarity on when that will be soon. As you can see here, we've had 2 very definite waves of infection in Australia, and the second one luckily is certainly over now. In Sydney itself, there's been about 10 or 11 days of no community transmission, which is pretty amazing. So certainly a safe place to be, and much of the country is back to a normal life, which we're very thankful for as well. So benefits of an Australian education, Tori.
Right, so one of the things we like to start off with is just a little bit of familiarity with Australia itself. So geographically, the size of Australia is similar to that of the US, but where you would notice a significant difference is in terms of the population. So the entire population is around 25 million people, and as you can see, compared to the population of California, being one state, it's a much smaller population. And that being said, the population is generally sort of concentrated around the outer edges of the country and not far from the coast. So this is a fun statistic we like to throw out there, that 90% of the Australian population actually lives within 60 miles of the coast, and some of the world's most beautiful coastlines and beaches indeed. Another really, I think, interesting and welcoming fact about Australia is that 1 in 4 Australians are actually born overseas. So you'll see quite a range of diversity in cultures across the country. So we can move on. There we are. So again, another map of Australia, but again, you'll also notice that the concentration of universities, much like the population, is around the coasts, and heavily populated on the eastern side of the country, but certainly some great universities on the western side as well. So overall, there's 43 universities. Of those universities, 40 are public, 2 are international, and 1 is private. The Australian universities range in size anywhere from around 20,000 right up through to 60, sometimes upwards of 70,000 students at the universities. So quite large compared to some of the smaller universities here in the US, but certainly each one would have its own charm and unique characteristics that we'll touch on about our own universities in a bit. Now this slide is always fun and something that you know, you think, well, how different could it be? We're both English speaking countries. It's quite different in terms of the systems of higher education in both. So we like to just sort of lay out the major differences, and we'll touch on this again throughout the presentation and sort of how it relates, and give some anecdotal stories as we progress. But look, so in the US, most students in university are able to enroll as undecided or undeclared, and that is different to how it works in Australia. So in Australia, when you enter university, you would know which program or degree it is that you have selected, and you attend university for that particular program. You can switch, it's possible, but that may then add some time onto your degree, which is another major difference between the two systems. Here in the US, we know that the average undergraduate degree is a 4-year degree, whereas in Australia, it's a 3-year degree. And so that's also something we like to alert people to as well. Grading here in the US is based on overall performance, on assignments. Often there's an attendance grade in some of the universities. There are many touch points along the way where students are being assessed, whereas in Australia, it's much more exam heavy. And my colleague Todd will touch upon this a bit later as well, but it's just a different way of grading. More exam heavy, and more weight of the grade is put onto that 1 or 2 exams throughout the semester. Applications. So in Australia, as an international student, you would be applying direct and online, as opposed to sort of through any system like a Common App or any sort of coalition, sorry. So the applications are rolling, and on rolling admissions typically, and free. The entry requirements are based on standardized testing usually, and GPA, and very much focused on your academic merit. So whereas here in the US, we're looking at things like your statement or your references or what you've done in extracurriculars. It's not the same in Australia. It's very much based on academic merit. Another great benefit to the system in Australia is the ability to fast track through certain programs that would otherwise require graduate level study here in the US. Some of those would be medicine, veterinary, and law. And then once more, with regard to financial aid and student aid, some Australian universities do accept the US financial aid packages and others don't. But in Australia, any aid or scholarships mostly are they're based on merit as opposed to need. So that's something to keep in mind as you start to explore your options of studying in Australia. And now I'll hand it over to Todd to talk a bit more about the academic and student life.
Sure. So I think, one thing is that all Australian universities are quite large by American standards. A small university in Australia is going to be like 20,000 students, and some of us are upwards of 60,000 students. So students should be prepared that, especially at the introductory level, you're going to have very large lectures, maybe of hundreds of students. Even before the pandemic, everything was being put online, which I guess is now kind of par for the course for everyone. However, a key feature is that all classes, we call subjects, are going to be supplemented with a weekly tutorial, which could be a small group discussion or lab. So even though you're at very large institutions, you really are going to have that chance for more personal engagement and interaction. We have mentioned that we are more of a European model where there's going to be fewer assessments, and they could count more heavily, and that also that there's going to be a lot more rigorous grading. I know when I went to Australia and I heard everyone's like, yeah, I got a pass, which was like 60%, and I thought, wow, like that's really like not very high achieving, really, to know like you have to really work hard to get above, those kind of marks. Let's go on to the next slide. So in terms of what's a really good fit for coming to Australia, obviously coming all the way to Australia from the US, you have to have that sense of maturity and a bit of adventure, but also being a bit more of an independent learner. You certainly have resources there to reach out to help for you, but you have to be a bit more proactive than you might be in the United States. What I loved about going as a student in Australia is just also these excellent standards, but also everyone's just a little bit more laid back, no worries made, and doing things a bit differently. We get more into our calendar, but that also your summer vacation is going to be like late mid-November through mid-February. Okay, on to the next slide, please. So student life, we're going to have an orientation, and there's always going to be an orientation for international students and integrated in then with the university-wide orientation. So in terms of the campus vibe, a lot of Australian students do tend to live at home, but that's not to say that there is a lot going on in campus with clubs and activities. There's on-campus housing. Just to confuse you, we call the residential dormitories colleges. There's also student apartments. Sports is really big in Australia. I guess the one big difference is we don't have the culture in the States of, everyone going to the big game on Friday night or Saturday afternoon. But sports can be everything from intramurals to intervarsity. And on to the next slide. There is going to be a lot of support services, dedicated support services for international students. And we all tend to have a very high proportion of at least 20% international students, but also support services to support any learning differences, whether it means extra time to take an exam, or in terms of just working with you in terms of the assessments of factoring in different learning challenges. Okay, I think that's it for an overview of academic student life.
Okay, so everybody always wants to know how much does it cost, and often we hear people say, oh, it must be so expensive, I could never manage. But this chart here paints the picture of what it does cost in terms of the average Australian degree. And it's nice because it breaks it down line item by line item and compares it to a few of the universities here in the US. If you just look there at the bottom line, the significant difference can be seen in the fact that the overall cost of the degree can often be half of that at other universities here in the US. So I think before you get sort of intimidated by that, just have a look and think through what are your options, and then start to compare those tuition costs across the board. Now, of course, it's important to bear in mind that, yes, this is significantly less, and it's also based upon a 3-year degree. So like I said before, degrees in Australia are typically undergrad degrees 3 years as opposed to 4, which would be reflective in the price as well. Next slide. Thank you. So other ways, information about the finances. So typically we recommend that students have between $13,000 and $18,000 US for living expenses while they're in country. One of the nice benefits of a student visa is that students are able to work for up to 20 hours per week while they're in study periods, and then when they're in non-teaching weeks, they can work full-time. That number jumps out at us rather quickly in the fact that minimum wage is often upwards of, that's the minimum wage is about $20 per hour, and often students or employees are making more than that. So it's really a nice way if you can get that part-time employment to start saving up and helping to finance your cost of living while in Australia. Again, the scholarships are typically merit-based. And each of us has different scholarship programs. So when you're looking at applying, certainly be in touch with the reps from the universities and have a look at the websites to see what's available. Currently, the exchange rate is quite favorable. So if you're considering heading down under, now's a good time. And another really nice benefit to studying in Australia, as part of your requirements as an international student, you are required to have what's called overseas health care. And essentially that's your health or medical insurance for while you're studying in Australia. That can cost typically around $2,000, give or take. And that's really quite affordable because it covers everything that you could need. So if you need to go to hospital or have medication, that's covered in this overseas healthcare. So it's a comprehensive plan that you don't have to worry about what happens if you get sick overseas, because that is, you know, one of the natural concerns when considering making such a big move.
Okay, now we'll talk about the application process applying to Australian universities. And unfortunately, we don't make it that easy for you in terms of each university does have its own application portal, so you will need to go direct to the institution. And we all have quite different entry requirements as well. Some schools have been able to go test optional due to COVID-19. Other schools require the test, and they also require AP exams as well. So each of our universities will sort of talk about that in further detail when we present on each one, so you sort of get an understanding of what's required. But generally speaking, it's very much an academic merit-based process. So we don't require essays or recommendation letters because we look at your GPA and SAT, ACT and APs to determine whether or not you are going to be successful at the university. It's a little bit different to the US in terms of we go by the theory you're mature enough to make the decision yourself as to whether or not we're the best fit, and that's why we don't require the essays or recommendation letters. So we can be very transparent with you and tell you exactly what you need to achieve to get into the university, and in theory you should get an offer based on that. So students often ask, like, what is your acceptance rate? And we don't have one, we don't publish one, because in theory we should have 100% acceptance rate if students clearly look at our entry requirements. With that, we don't require resumes or CVs either. It is just your academics. So although it's important for your US schools that you sort of do sports and you're captains of different things, Australian, most international universities actually don't look at that at all. Very few programs require interviews. Only some professional programs like a medical degree or dentistry, for example, would require a medicine. An interview, but we all have rolling admissions, and generally speaking, most universities will be able to give an offer to you within 2 or 3 weeks of applying. So you could be in your first semester of your senior year and know you've got a place at university, which is pretty helpful. I'm not sure if we have Australian citizens on the line tonight, but please do let us know if you are an Australian citizen, because there is an event coming up on October 19 specifically for Australians who hold the passport, and we can let you know how to apply. It's a very straightforward process. But it is a little different to if you're applying without an Australian passport. So please let us know and we'll give you that detail. Todd will actually pop it into the comments for you so you can register for that event. But it is a little different, like I said, in terms of the application, as well as deadlines and how it is funded as well. So Australians are able to defer their payment if they want to. But again, come to that event on October 19 if you are an Australian passport holder. Okay, moving on to each of the universities and to Melbourne. Deakin.
But it is based in the city of Melbourne, so nice, you know, we'll go with that. So again, my name is Tori. I'm from Deakin University, based in Melbourne, Australia. My contact details are here on the screen, so if you have any questions following, please feel free to reach out at any point. So we can move forward. Thanks, Lea-Anne. Deakin University is a young university, so we were established in the 70s, and since that time have really grown into a world-ranked, comprehensive teaching and research university. You can see on the map here, again, another map of Australia. You will all be very familiar with Australian geography by the end of this presentation, no doubt. But you can see that the overall map is in green. The state of Victoria, where our university is based, is here in pink. And then these dots along the coastline are our physical locations. So we have 4 physical campuses, 2 in Geelong, 1 just outside of Melbourne, and then 1 further down the coast in Warrnambool. Overall, we have around 65,000 students. And again, that's split across the 4 physical campuses, and we also have a cloud campus. So of those 64,000 students, around 16,000 are international students. So we've got quite a diverse student population and representative of the whole world. We are known as Australia's Digital Academy. So long before COVID, Deakin was advanced in terms of providing access to education online and also enhancing the student experience through bespoke digital solutions in our environment that help navigate the university experience. I'll talk a bit about that more as we progress, but those are really the things that are special and unique about Deakin. And often when you ask students, what makes Deakin great? What is it that stands out to you? And they say there's just a vibe about it, that people are down to earth, they're ready to help. You get answers from colleagues at Deakin, and really we put the student experience first and foremost. So we can move on. Thank you. So here are our strongest areas in terms of the current rankings. So Deakin is very well known for exercise and sports science. So we're currently ranked up in the top 10 in the world. And we're also very well known for sport management. So if you're considering anything in sport, whether that's on the scientific side of things or the management side, consider Deakin. We're very strong and we've got partnerships with some of the best schools in the world. And our researchers are cutting edge in those discipline areas. Similarly, we rank very highly in education and nursing. And then across the subject rankings, we would be ranking in the top 150 across the arts, and then again in business. It's important to point out that as part of your course at Deakin, as part of your degree, we can offer all sorts of practical, hands-on, integrated opportunities for you to get experience that will then lend kindly to setting yourself up to be successful as you progress into the job market. Next slide again. So earlier I touched on the fact that Deakin is known for student satisfaction, and in our state, that state that was the pink state outlined in the overall map, we've won highest level of student satisfaction in the state for the past 9 years. Essentially what that means is our students are feeling as though they are getting what they need out of the education we provide in order to transition into a successful career. And so we take that very seriously. We provide comprehensive student support and an environment that lends kindly to making sure students are getting what they need from a world-class university. I touched briefly about some of the bespoke digital enhancements that we have at Deakin, and two of the ones that I like to sort of point out and suggest if you're looking at studying at Deakin, have a closer look at these because they really are unique. One is Deakin Sync, and that's essentially just your home base where you can get all of your information about Deakin in one spot. It's just sort of a dashboard for you, a personalized dashboard, and it links into everything you need, from fees to enrollment to schedules to buying, putting extra money on your meal card. So that's a really cool support system. And then we also have what's called Deakin Genie. And Deakin Genie is essentially Siri for the Deakin environment. So we've developed it in collaboration with students. And so students came up with the need for this, and really it just helps you keep your life organized. So it's a personal assistant. You can ask it to schedule study times for you, to book a hot desk for you, to help you find your lecture theater. So it really helps navigate an unfamiliar environment that you would be entering into as a student, and then it adds an additional level of support as an international student as well. So next slide, please. Thank you. Again, we're a comprehensive university, so pretty much the things that you would want to study, we would offer. And here are our key study areas. Our entry requirements are typically based on SAT or ACT plus your GPA. Currently, we have decided to go test optional, just given the situation of the world. And so we're basing admission decisions on GPA. At Deakin, we have 3 starting dates. So depending on the program you wanted to study, you could start in March, July, or November. So that sort of gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of if you want to finish up a job before you head over, or you want to finish up your internship. It just gives a nice option for you to start at different points across the year. And again, these are our areas of expertise and strength. And I thank you for your time and attention. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out at any point or pop them into the chat. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to stay in Melbourne, and if you want to sound like a native, the R is silent. So this is a shot from our campus, and let's head to the next slide, please. And so welcome to UniMelb, or as we say in the local Aboriginal language, Wominjeka. So University of Melbourne ranks actually 26th in the world. And I think that UC Berkeley is one of our partner institutions, is very much a similar in terms of university, in terms of public university, comprehensive, research intensive, even the campus vibe and the climate of what we have here. So we date back to 1853, but we are constantly evolving, and we've actually recently revised our curriculum, which I'll go into shortly. We're a very large institution with 25,000 undergraduates and an equal number of graduate students, and more than nearly half of those students are international students. Our community of American students are mostly Americans coming for a semester abroad, but several hundred students. But we see a growing number of students coming from high school. So there is an American community if students want to do it, plus being part of this amazing diversity of that we represent. Our campus, if we could go to the next slide, please. We are located in the heart of, we'll just say that our degrees are 3 years, and annual tuition in US dollars, it's going to be just under $30,000. In Australia, the tuition ranges depending on which degree and actually which subject that you do. So if we'll just head to the next slide. So our campus is a mixture of beautiful sandstone buildings dating back to the 1800s. And if we go to the next slide, also some very modern facilities as well. This is the entrance to one of our humanities buildings. And all of this in the city of Melbourne, 7 times voted the most livable city in the world. So the one shot is our campus, which is only about 15 minutes from downtown. We're right next to Little Italy on one side, which makes for great eating, and the biomedical precinct on the other side, where researchers are doing things like mapping heat-resistant coral to save the Great Barrier Reef. So there's also some amazing opportunities in STEM for research for students, and Melbourne is regarded as the Silicon Valley of biotechnology. It's a city of cafes and music, and easy access to some really stunning nature. So let's go on to the next slide to talk a little bit more about academics. So we have streamlined our degrees into just 8 degrees. We also are a comprehensive university, so there's going to be a wide range of majors, and many of these rank in the top 40 internationally. We are unique among the Australian universities in that we have 25% of your degree is breadth subject. So it's kind of like Gen Ed in the United States, in that you actually don't have to declare a major until your final 3rd year. And it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of tailoring your studies and possibly switching degrees around as well. On to the next slide. So if you're doing a US high school diploma, the entry requirements are going to vary per degree. And so that's going to be an SAT or ACT. We currently are not test optional. That is under review. But because of the differences in our academic year, that you could start the application anytime during the senior year, but actually not submit an SAT or ACT until the end of the senior year. And it's an unweighted GPA. And we are one of the few Australian universities that do require AP exams to meet prerequisites. So if you don't have, like say, calculus, we actually do have an online course for high school students, or the alternative would have to be submitting a university level subject for assessment to meet those prerequisites. And if we'll go to the next slide, please. We're quite unique among the world in that doing a high school in the US and being a native speaker doesn't meet our English language proficiency. So that can be met with either of the AP English exams, a university level English subject, a dual credit type of course, or something like IELTS or TOEFL. However, if you're doing IB, that would meet the English requirements for the university. So speaking of IB, going on to the next slide, we also accept the IB, and this would be guaranteed admission based on these scores and some subjects that you have to cover. And our website will detail quite specifically more about these specific subjects. Okay, so, and if we have any transfer students, that would be based purely on your undergraduate GPA. All right, on to the next. We can guarantee housing, whether that's in our residential colleges or the student accommodation. And we'll just wrap up, I think, into the next slide. No campus visit would be complete without visiting our underground car park, which on to the next slide. As you can see, it's featured in things like the Mad Max movie. So finally, just on to the next slide. I'm Todd St. Vrain, the North America manager. So please get in contact with us if you have any questions. And also I'll be sending around details. We're having an event on October 28th, UniMelb Ask an Undergrad, a panel of current students so that you really hear what the academic and living experience is like. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Todd. Now over to Sydney, which is the world's most Instagrammable city. And as you can see here, it is a pretty stunning city. Macquarie University is located about 20 minutes from the downtown area of Sydney. So best of both worlds, the big cosmopolitan city experience with the incredible beaches. And then you can retreat back to campus, which is a really beautiful parkland university. We have 40,000 students, and of that there are 12,000 international students. So one of the most diverse student populations globally. I did a Master of International Relations at the university and can certainly say that I definitely benefit from such diverse classrooms as well. When you're learning about Middle Eastern studies or sort of the history, being with people from those corners of the world is so important. It's a very vibrant campus with lots of things happening, and what you would expect as a student in the US, you would find that Australian students expect that as well. So we have lots of clubs and associations and a lot of support services as well. The biggest difference is we don't have the NCAA, but we certainly have sports that you can try out, and a lot of students participate in the Australian university games and say it's one of the highlights of their degrees. So a lot of really cool opportunities there as well. Muse there is our student study area essentially. They claim to have the longest, most continuous desk in the Southern Hemisphere, which I find quite funny. There's not much competition in the Southern Hemisphere. We have a sports club as well, and as you can see there, outdoor pool. Our weather does allow that. In winter, if it's below 65 degrees, we complain it's too cold. If it's above 90 degrees in the summer, we complain it's too hot. So generally speaking, it's quite a mild weather. I would say quite similar to Los Angeles, if anyone is familiar with the weather in California. If you're trying to compare, probably Melbourne is most similar to San Francisco. In terms of our studies, so again, Macquarie predominantly has 3-year programs because we don't have those general education requirements. Some of our professional programs are 4 years, like our law degree, which you can do at undergraduate level, and our engineering as well, and psychology too. You could certainly choose to do 2 degrees together. If you're not entirely sure what you want to do, you could do a Bachelor of Commerce, for example, with a Bachelor of Arts, and do a couple of majors and minors within that. So I generally recommend for students who aren't entirely sure what they want to do a double degree, and you've got a lot of area and ability there to try different subjects, and then you can specialize in your master's degree. In terms of our engineering, we specialise in software and telecommunications engineering, and fun fact for you, we invented Wi-Fi, so you're welcome. We also have an incredible Bachelor of Clinical Science, Doctor of Medicine program, which is a 6-year degree out of high school, and it allows you to finish and to become a doctor within that time. In your 5th year, you actually go to India, which is a compulsory part of the program, and then in your 6th year, you have the ability to come back to the United States and do clinical rotations at Dartmouth College in Washington, St. Louis. So some pretty amazing opportunities there as well. You can certainly live on campus when you are with us in Sydney. It's not compulsory, it's not guaranteed, but generally, as long as you apply early, you certainly will be able to stay on campus. And it does depend on what kind of lifestyle you want and how much money you want to put towards accommodation as to the best option for you. Some are like university style dorms where you live on a corridor, you have your own bedroom, you may share a bathroom, and that has a full meal plan. Generally in Australia, meal plans are associated with your accommodation residence as opposed to the university base like you would find here in the US. This image is the Macquarie University village where you live in a townhouse with 5 or 6 other students. You have your own bedroom and your own bathroom. Australians find it funny that Americans share bedrooms in college. So you generally will always have your own bedroom studying in Australia, which is nice. In terms of costs, our tuition is approximately $24,000 per year. It does change a little bit depending on what you do want to study, but that's very clear on our website, and I can help you through that if there's any questions there. Living costs are around $15,000 US. So in total, you can expect to pay around $40,000 per year in Australia. That's your flights, accommodation, insurance, and all that sort of fun things. That's not considering that you can use your US financial aid or private loans to study with us, and we do have merit-based scholarships. So as long as you've got a good GPA, you are looking at about a $10,000 scholarship towards your first year of study, which is pretty helpful. As we were saying, you can also work in Australia. A minimum wage is about $20 an hour, so students often find that super helpful when they're trying to plan their finances for coming overseas. And you are able to stay and work in Australia for 2 years after graduation if you want to. So how to apply? You apply direct to the university. It's free to apply, which I always forget to mention because I forget how expensive it is to apply to US institutions. Normally we do require the SAT or ACT score, but we are test optional at the moment due to COVID-19, and I suspect that will continue as well. So we will just look at your GPA. And if you let me know what you want to study, I can certainly let you know what requirements you would need for that GPA, but generally speaking, if you're above a 3 out of 4, you should be fine to get into a majority of our programs. So once you apply to the university, you generally get a response within about a week. We'll give you an offer letter, and then you can apply for scholarships, which is pretty straightforward as well. And then you accept your place in the program and pay the deposit and purchase overseas healthcare insurance. And then you apply to get your visa and come to Australia. So it's a pretty straightforward process. And my job is to make sure it's as easy as possible for you. So I'll certainly help you there. Obviously, being in the Southern Hemisphere, our dates are a little different as well. We do start in the February and the July, similar to Deakin. And we have a new November intake for the first time this year. So there is quite a lot of flexibility there. A majority of our students do start in the February and the July. They're both sort of equal in terms of our intakes as well. And I also like to mention, obviously, our summer is at the end of the year. So December, January, February, you will be on summer vacation. So you can certainly stay and work in Australia and travel around the country or go further afield. Or if you want to come home, it's a great opportunity to do internships here in the States. Because of course, all your friends and schoolmates will be back in college. So you won't have much competition there as well. And Macquarie does have a philosophy of graduating global citizens. So if you want to do a 3rd or 4th country experience, you can certainly do that as well. We have scholarships available for students to do another semester or summer abroad. So we can certainly help you do that as well. I personally have studied in 5 countries, and I tell students to beat me and make it 6 or 7 because it's incredible how many opportunities are available for you. That is it for us. We would love to take your questions. Please do let us know if there are any available.
We did have a question just about studying in New Zealand. So for our Kiwi friends across the Tasman, I'm going to pop into the chat a link to studying in New Zealand that the New Zealand government has, which you can explore your options. There are many commonalities between New Zealand and Australia in that our universities tend to all be large, public, similar that we have different academic year that follows the calendar year, and admissions based primarily or exclusively on your academic achievement. So you can explore more about that, but we're happy to also talk more questions about Australia. One question we get a lot is, our degrees are 3 years. Does that count towards graduate school or getting a job back in the United States? Lea-Anne, Tori, what would you all say to that?
Yeah, so all the universities in Australia are sort of top 300 to 400, so they're very well recognised globally. And the 3-year degree is quite common for most countries outside of the United States, actually. It's pretty much just the US, Canada, Scotland and Malaysia that do a 4-year degree. So, you know, Oxford and Cambridge, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, also have the 3-year degree. So it is well recognised back here in the United States. You're basically saving yourself a year of study and a year of paying tuition.
And I think also that, you know, we've mentioned that in Australia, all international students have the option to stay and work for 2 years after graduation. So students, you know, really have options in terms of where they can start their career.
Definitely.
We had a question about marine biology. Does anyone have a marine biology? Maybe we'll start with Deakin.
Yep, so we have a Bachelor of Environmental Science that just focuses on marine biology, and we also have a Bachelor of Marine Sciences at Deakin. And we've got some really good facilities. So we've got a whale nursery out in that Warrnambool campus. We've got some of the most advanced sonar technology in the world. And then on our Geelong campus, we have a lab and a learning center that's multi-million dollars that's right there on the coastline. So quite active in that space.
And Macquarie has a Bachelor of Environment with a major in Marine Sciences, and students are able to do their placements on the Great Barrier Reef, which is a great opportunity.
And finally, at Melbourne, we actually have a specific major in marine biology, in addition to majors in zoology and environmental science. And our campus is about 40 minutes by public transport from the oceans. So certainly opportunities for practical experiences. While the water's a little bit colder than the Great Barrier Reef, which is about 4.5 hours to the north, but I think there might be some short-term things up there as well. And I'll pop into the chat the reference for that. Lea-Anne, I think there was this question specific for you from Macquarie.
Yeah, there's a question about whether Macquarie requires the AP scores, and we do not. We generally just look at your GPA at the moment.
So there's 43 universities in Australia, and I'm aware of only 3 of us that require AP exams.
It's a question about, because Australia doesn't have the NCAA, but we do have sports, is there a version of athletic recruiting like in the US? Generally speaking, there isn't, but each of the universities certainly help and have some scholarships and recruit's not the right word, but generally support students that are athletes at a high level. So talking for Macquarie, we certainly support state and national athletes. They get a scholarship and they also get academic coaches as well. But is that the same for you guys, or is it a bit different?
So we have an elite sporting program at Deakin. So often some of the country's professional athletes are enrolled into our program. And so what that means is there's additional support for students who are elite athletes within the country itself. And certainly if you're an elite athlete coming from another, of course, from the US, those same accommodations could be made. And we have the facilities that are required. So if there's a necessary training facility that students have to train in, we can accommodate that.
Yeah, I think we have an elite athlete program too. There are some scholarships for that as well. And yeah, so students can play at the intervarsity, intercollegiate level, in addition just to intramurals. A question about, do we all have any early decision?
I think in theory we do, because students can apply basically at any time they're in their senior year. We don't class it as early decision, we just sort of put it all together as a general application pool, and that's because we're working with students from all over the world that are working on very different timelines. So Australian universities are very flexible there.
Yeah, and again, I think if you're an international student, it's different for Australian citizens. Yeah, you can apply anytime during your senior year, and our advice would be to apply at the same time that you're applying to US universities. We have something called a conditional offer, so maybe it's an outstanding AP exam or final GPA, or could even be an outstanding SAT or ACT from Melbourne, but at least you can know that you would have a place provided that you meet these conditions. And then, with students finishing in like May or June here in the States, many of us, our second semester starts in like late July or August, and you could start straight away after high school graduation mid-year, but then other students want to apply for a deferral or have a mini gap year and start like the year following high school graduation.
Is there any other question? No? Perfect. Well, just a reminder, we are doing Wednesday webinars right through until December. So if there are any other that catch your eye, feel free to register for those. And the recorded ones will be on our website as well, on our website. We are all based in the United States, and our goal is to make the process as easy as possible for you. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And we would love to see you studying in Australia. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.